Welcome to the Daily Dose, where we are currently walking through an overview of the entire Bible. Join us today as we learn the story of Scripture and see God's redemptive plan through Christ from cover to cover. Let's listen to Matt Reisetter, Director of Christian Crusaders and the Cedar Falls Bible Conference.
Today we're going to be in John chapter 16, verses 1 through 15. This is where Jesus feeds the 5,000, and that is the only earthly miracle that is recorded in all four Gospels. Because of this, it's somewhat familiar. In fact, we've covered it in previous Gospels, but I think there's going to be some new stuff for us today. And before we get to that, I want to thank the Family Leader for being our 2023 Daily Dose Devotion sponsor. You can hear more about them in the announcements at the end of this podcast, and as always, thank you to the Family Leader for their support. John chapter 6, verse 1. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on a mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. So Jesus is kind of with his disciples getting away from everybody. He's going up into the mountain to a solitary place. Many times, Scripture would tell us that when he went away like this, he would go to pray. But Jesus is more than a year into his ministry, and so large crowds are following him. They've heard the stories. They've seen the miracles. Continuing in verse 4. Now, the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. And this simple verse is significant for a couple reasons. Number one, Jesus' earthly ministry spanned 3 Passovers. We covered one of those Passovers in John chapter 2. Now, this mentions the second Passover of Jesus' earthly ministry in John chapter 6. That means a year has gone by between John 2 and John 6. And not only that, but during the Passover, many Jews would go south to Jerusalem. But here this large crowd is up in the north around the Sea of Galilee following Jesus. That's not terribly significant because not everybody went to Jerusalem for the Passover, but it's worth noting and a little bit ironic. While the big Jewish religious show is going on in Jerusalem, there's a few thousand people up here running around after Jesus because they've heard about who he is and what he does. Verse 5. Lifting up his eyes then and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. A denarii is about a day's wage for a laborer. 200 denarii would be about 8 months worth of wages. It says in the text that Jesus asked this question to Philip to test him. What do you think this test with Philip was all about? Well, I think that Jesus is presenting to Philip a situation that is impossible to be fixed humanly. And maybe he wants to hear how Philip approaches that. And Philip immediately goes to a human solution, but he realizes that it's impossible. We don't have enough money to buy these people even a little food. I'm guessing that after Philip sees this miracle take place, the next time he's presented with a situation that is humanly impossible to fix, he's going to think, wait a minute, maybe Jesus, maybe God is able to fix this situation, even though I or any other humans I know are not able to fix it. And that's a good reminder for us, isn't it? I know several people right now who are facing challenges of many kinds that no human is going to be able to fix, only God. And whether he'll fix those situations the way that we hope that he might, we don't know. But it is an act of faith, an act of trust, an act of humility for us to acknowledge we can't do anything about this. If anything's going to happen, God, it's got to come from you. Verse 8, one of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told the disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that had been done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. So I want to touch on a couple more things quickly. Number one, John, as well as the other gospel writers, give us a number, 5,000 men. In Matthew, it mentions that there were some women and children there, which could have made the size of this crowd anywhere from 10 to 20,000 people. The other thing John includes is that there's so much bread bread left over that they fill 12 basketfuls after everyone has had their fill. These are specific details included to help us be convinced that this miracle really happened the way that the text says it does. It's also interesting that Jesus perceives at the end of this that the crowd wants to take him and make him their king. Of course, they're thinking of a king in an earthly sense, and that's not what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to be a king in a spiritual sense, to be a redeemer, to be the Messiah, to be the mediator between God and man, the one who would reconcile us by faith in him to our Father, to forgive our sin, to impute to us his righteousness. So when he perceives this, something that most men would lean into, he dips out. I want to make one more application from this text, which you've probably heard preached about before, and that's this. The boy who brought 5 loaves and 2 fish didn't have much to offer. And the fact is, we don't have much to offer God either. If anything fruitful for God's kingdom is going to come from anything we have to offer, it's going to have to be God doing something miraculous with what we give. Our time, our talents, our treasures. So rather than thinking that we need to accumulate more knowledge or more expertise before we offer ourselves to do ministry for the Lord, why not just give him what we've got right now in whatever moment he calls us to give it to him? And when we do, we'll be shocked and amazed and abundantly fulfilled at what he does with our meager offerings. Come back next time for Jesus Walking on Water. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day.
This is The Daily Dose, a podcast of Christian Crusaders Radio and Internet Ministry. Please subscribe on Apple, Google, or Spotify podcasts, or download the free Christian Crusaders app and share with a friend. Also, prayerfully consider supporting our ministry at ChristianCrusaders.org, where you can find our weekly 30-minute radio broadcast, airing on stations around the world since 1936, and where you can listen to our Conversations podcast featuring inspiring interviews with interesting Christians. Special thanks to our 2022 Daily Dose sponsor, The Family Leader. God designed 3 social institutions, the family, the church, and government. At The Family Leader, they are bringing all 3 together, honoring God and blessing our neighbors. Learn how and join them at thefamilyleader.com. We also want to highlight another special ministry partner, the Cedar Falls Bible Conference. Check out conference videos and schedule of events online at cedarfallsbibleconference.com and mark your calendars for Saturday, July 29th through Saturday, August 5th, 2023 for the 102nd Annual Cedar Falls Bible Conference. Thank you for listening, and may God richly bless you.